hashtag segment. Let's talk some moving things. And to help us do that, I want to welcome in TD Ameritrade Network contributor Jenny Horn joining me here in studio, and the co-founder of LikeFolio.com, Andy Swan, joining us as well. And so naturally, UPS and FedEx come to mind here, but there's actually some new entrants into this space as well. Amazon, of course, one as well.
Right, and I was curious to see that their LikeFolio's data has a few other companies we'll talk about. But to start, FedEx versus UPS, also both trading lower today, sort of with this broader sell-off that you and Kevin just mentioned. But UPS shares rose as much as 90% over the last 12 months. This was obviously a name that benefited from the pandemic and this sort of surge in e-commerce. Now, FedEx was the same way. They rose about twofold in the last year. Both of these names outperforming the broader market, but they do have a lot of, headwinds with this heightened demand. One being that earlier this month, FedEx actually suspended about 1,400 freight shipping customers in attempts to actually ease its network congestion. They have both struggled to sort of deliver packages on time. Now, a Wall Street Journal report I read actually said FedEx is doing a little bit worse than its peer UPS, but they both experienced what they call this peak-like surge in package volume, and both FedEx and UPS hiked their delivery surcharges in May and June. So this massive growth in the company's shipments is, of course, good news for the companies, but it's just really how they're able to sort of handle it and keep their customers happy, because, of course, we live in right now, I believe, the greediest time for the consumer as far as delivery. People want things delivered within the hour, within that day, and if they don't get it, they take to social media to complain. Now, a huge player in this space is Amazon. Amazon has sort of slowly crept up to become a major player in this space. They've become more of this delivery and logistical rival to these names, which has weighed on both of these companies' sort of sentiment from investors. Now, in 2019, actually, FedEx sort of started this feud with Amazon by refusing to renew some of Amazon's domestic contracts. So then Amazon came back and basically blocked sellers from using FedEx as a result. So that obviously, created this sort of spat between the two. Now, FedEx and UPS are both alike now, trying to sort of advance their technology to, I think, compete with the powerhouse that is Amazon. And I think that it's going all right, but it does seem like they're a little bit behind Amazon in that aspect. But that brings me to our first tweet of the day, which says, FedEx is using Neuro self-driving vehicles for deliveries, while UPS is using unmanned drones for delivery. Compound annual growth rate for these companies is underrated. So actually, there was surprisingly a good amount of bullish noise on social media regarding both of these companies, but it just seems like compared to Amazon, it doesn't get the same quite as amount of attention, which is what our next tweeter talks about, which says, Amazon is on track to become one of the largest delivery companies in the U.S., with estimates to deliver 7 billion packages in 2021, surpassing 6 billion packages UPS is expected to deliver in the U.S. this year. In recent years, Amazon has quietly built a shipping operation that rivals the likes of UPS, FedEx, and USPS. So, Andy, my question to you is, as far as if this tweeter is correct or not, I cannot say, but as far as happiness goes, I have to think there is a leader in this space based on the fact of how often these people are getting their packages on time.
Yeah, there is. We're really seeing quite a shift, I think, in the whole logistics market. Things have changed dramatically and continue to do so, Jenny, just because, exactly like you said, the demand from the consumer has changed so much. We see, curbside pickup and same-day delivery absolutely going crazy versus where they were in 2019. And what that does is it ushers in new competitors like Uber, like even DoorDash. It's not just UPS and FedEx leading the way anymore. It's Amazon creating their own shipping network. It's third-party providers like Uber, DoorDash, Instacart, all of these others that can get things hyper-local delivered. And so with this massive surge in delivery expectations, and especially the timeline around those, the single-day delivery, the 2-day delivery is now out. We have to have it within the hour or within the day. And what that's done is brought a lot of new innovation into the space, and it's not necessarily coming from FedEx and UPS. So I think in a lot of cases, they are playing catch up in a really, really big way. And it will be very interesting to see how far ahead they can stay of these competitors, or those, like you said, Jenny, that are bringing it in-house or outsourcing to third parties. So I think this is one of the most confusing and interesting times in logistics and shipping in a very, very long time.
Andy, how do you compare FedEx and UPS? Because these companies have some pretty different, polarizing characteristics to them. You know, I mean, FedEx seems to be, you know, not as popular as UPS, but then UPS, you know, they got the brown suits and the brown trucks, and do they have like a Walmart-style identity crisis at UPS? Brown hasn't been popular since Ronald Reagan was president. Why do they? Is that what some of the problem is with UPS? Because they seem to do a good job. And, you know, for a person my age and not Jenny Horn's age, who isn't used to getting things the same day or a day later or 2 days later, I've never seen it a more efficient system. Yet, people still deadpan these companies. So what is the biggest difference between these two, and what is the biggest problem they have with some of their positive or lack of positive reactions out there?
Yeah, so for LikeFolio, there's only so much into these businesses we can see because we're
Sure.
ingesting and analyzing consumer reactions to these companies and miss out on a lot of the B2B stuff. But on those margins of the consumer, you really start to see which of these companies is ultimately making consumers happier. And I think that is a leading indicator of where other companies will want to ship through. And so right now we've got UPS is beating FedEx in consumer happiness by a pretty wide margin, by 16 points. And the drivers of that are, is my package on time? Was it damaged? Did the guy throw it over the fence into my yard? How was my package cared for? How accurate was the timing? It's the consumer has certain expectations in terms of speed, but they also don't want to be misled. So I think it's communication and the promptness of the delivery that are driving these. And so far, throughout this pandemic and throughout the resurgence of e-commerce and all these things, UPS seems to be handling things in terms of the consumer perception much better than FedEx. And so that tells me that's probably where businesses will try to go to, because the last thing you want to do is deliver a really great product to a customer that they're unhappy with the shipper and therefore had a bad experience with your company. And so I think right now UPS definitely advantage from the consumer perspective over FedEx.
Andy, I do love the way you mentioned the fact that people, post pictures of their packages like completely damaged. I mean, you can get down a pretty funny rabbit hole of people posting their like ridiculous deliveries, and I do have to say that would be terrible from a consumer standpoint. But my question to you is, with the overall e-commerce space right now and the trends we're seeing in e-commerce, is there any fear that as we move forward into a more reopened economy that, say, these companies might lose a huge amount of their demand if people are hypothetically shopping less online?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a concern. I also think that the fact that Amazon and that type of commerce where you order from something that's centralized somewhere far away from you and you get it delivered in 2 days, that model seems to be shifting and losing its luster with consumers considerably. So even if e-commerce stays strong, which it is, it's having it's got a tough comp year compared to 2020, but it is very strong when you look historically. Even with that being strong, the consumer's preference for things to be delivered within the hour or within the day really changes the usefulness of a FedEx and UPS, and it elevates the usefulness of a DoorDash and Instacart and Uber, who have that local logistics really figured out. So I think that's the next frontier. We'll see if UPS and FedEx really even try to get into that. But so far, they've got some really tough competition coming from the sidelines that a lot of people didn't see coming, and you had to be ahead of the curve. I think, LikeFolio was ahead of this a couple of years ago, talking about this shift in delivery expectations. And then, like you guys said, the pandemic hit. No one saw it coming, just like with Peloton in the last segment. But right place, right time. There's a lot of companies that really benefited, and UPS and FedEx seem to be playing catch up. They got a lot of boxes that they have to deliver. They're not sure how they're going to do that, and they're starting to make consumers a little bit unhappy.
Andy, I think that's a crucial point, because while these stocks have done very, very nicely, and probably rightly so, since the onset of the pandemic, if you look at them on a little bit longer time frame, some of the discrepancies in performance between the two companies is a little bit more pronounced. FedEx was clearly struggling versus UPS, and part of that maybe was picking a fight with Amazon, and maybe that's not the company you want to pick a fight with. But as things start to normalize, and even if there is behavior shifts, even if there is different expectations here, this was, like so many different parts of the market and the economy, an area that was ripe for disruption, and one that has certainly been disrupted by some of the names you mentioned, of course, by Amazon, even Walmart to some extent as well. And so as things start to normalize, even if they normalize at a higher level, I see e-commerce up 4.8% versus 2019. So still some growth there, but a little bit more normalized. Do some of these kind of fears of, how you're actually executing on delivering the packages play out further as things normalize? Now, it's not just about demand being excessive and we just go to whoever can ship it as fast as possible. Now we can be a little bit more choosy as a potential business. And is that where you expect, if it's going to play out at all, this consumer happiness discrepancy to actually play out?
Yeah, it is. I think Jenny kind of nailed it in the first part of the segment, talking about how greedy the consumer is. And we've all become accustomed to having things really quickly and delivered exactly how we want them. I mean, we're now to the point where they can deliver a milkshake and it's still good to drink when you get it. So when it comes to delivering stuff in boxes, our expectations are perfection. And so if you aren't hitting the mark of perfection, you're going to lose business, and you're going to see your customers give strong feedback to the third parties on Shopify, on all of these other e-commerce players, where I can't use you, FedEx, if you're going to be making my customers upset. And so I think that's the next wave of things, and it is really a tough spot to be in, because what used to seem like a miracle, getting something from California to Louisville, Kentucky to the right address within 2 days, is now standard. Obsolete. And the expectation is perfection.
Absolutely. Well said. And making us think about this a little bit differently too. Like, I completely understand the connection to Uber and DoorDash after this conversation, but that's not necessarily how I would have thought about it beforehand. So always thought-provoking and always interesting whenever Andy Swan joins us, co-founder of LikeFolio.com. Thanks as always. Jenny